What's up, guys? You are watching Workflow Engine. My name is Dennis. Here we are talking about different workflow engines. And today I want to compare two different workflow engines for you. First, Camunda 7 and second, Workflow Engine IO. They have completely different tech stack, but in fact they have many common architecture decisions. After this video you will be able to make right decision about your next workflow engine, or at least understand difference between Camunda 7 and Workflow Engine IO. Let's go! Any developer in enterprise environment has faced task of automation business processes. There are dozens of solutions to this issue as well as hundreds more ways to cope with it, and today we will discuss specific tools and a practical task. But before we start we need to understand what does it mean process automation tool. And I've mostly seen two implementation, and one of them is like a sequential or parallel execution of blocks of code, and we save intermediate state and execution history to database. And another the same idea, but we execute not business logic inside our code, but we call external system where business logic is already done. So it's often called microservice orchestration. And because people that talk about business process and business process automation, they like visualization and they understand everything through visualization. In all of cases, visualization of what happened inside our business process is required. Also, often we can require from our tool the way to change these blocks of code visually without involving any developers. If we remove this visualization and changing requirements from our topic, developers may have several alternatives, and for example like chain of responsibility pattern, state machine pattern, using Petri nets, our lovely LFLs and switch case, and maybe any of in-house. And it's worth to mention BPMN. BPMN is Business Process Model and Notation. It's a formal file format, XML file format that describe some of business process activities in specific way. They have specific abstraction for each type of activity, each type of gateway, and so on. And they have inside this formal format idea how we can map this activity to piece of code. So BPMN is well known and well described, and we have lots of tools like Workflow Engine where we can can take these files, put inside our Workflow Engine, and the system will able to execute this business process. Let's talk about the example. You can see it's a BPMN diagram for business process of buying online courses. And user go into web page, user select type of course, user input email, click paste, and website display model window for page from acquiring. The user make payments, acquiring send payment confirmation to our system, and system after this send a notification to user by email about details of our deal. And if user has not made the payment without 10 minutes, we can send the promotion code, and it's not necessary because maybe user trying to buy our course with promo code already. And I wanna compare two tools. One of them is Camunda 7. It's embedded workflow engine from JVM world, and Workflow Engine IO. It's one of few embedded C# engines. And I wanna compare them in traditional way. I mean, we will compare classic developer tools points you can see, and additional only is about BPMN support. Some of tools can offer BPMN support, but it's not necessary in my task, and I think BPMN support really you need to think twice about BPMN because it's kinda very powerful and quite complex standard, so you need to put effort and time to understand how it's work. So we will compare our two engines. I say Camunda 7, they have Camunda 8. It's quite difficult, quite different engine, and today we talk only about embedded engines, because Camunda 7 can work standalone and Camunda 8 can work only in standalone. So Workflow engine was written with C# and .NET, and Camunda 7 written with Java. So as I mentioned before, Workflow engine only embedding inside your application, and Camunda 7 you can use it through REST API. So Workflow engine didn't support BPMN, and Camunda 7 support BPMN. Also, about databases, all engines quite similar, but Workflow engine can support MongoDB, and Camunda 7 can support CockroachDB. All of tools have extensive documentation. All of tools have number of stars on GitHub, but Camunda have more. Also, Camunda community is really huge, and community about Workflow engine is quite small. And about scaling and Workflow engine and Camunda 7 scaling horizontally through databases. Camunda 7 have separate framework for testing. Also, Camunda 7 have separate application for administrating, for administration reasons. And Workflow engine doesn't have framework for testing or administration application. Also, all of tools provide completely free license for production, and I'm not sure about prices, because you need to quote all of them to ask for quote, but I know that Camunda 7 is cost for you monthly, but I know that Camunda 7 is price for Camunda 7 is higher, and you need to pay them annually. And I know that if you want to buy a Workflow engine, you can pay one time. And between those two technologies, there are essentially no difference. Because if you have C#, then in general you could use Camunda through REST API, but it's significantly time consuming and more complicated than using a Workflow engine. And if you have a JVM, then you simply cannot use Workflow engine. Since both of engines can be embedded, the fundamental requirement for both of them is how we can include vendor code to our program. For Camunda 7 we have several libraries like engine itself, REST API, web application for administration. All libraries can be added separately, and it's just easier like that. You need to add to your POM or Gradle file, something like this. Yeah, they have integration with Spring Boot, so it's quite easy. And Camunda will create all databases table by itself. Workflow engine has several libraries, also the engine itself, and REST API built it inside this library, and Workflow engine have a specific provider for specific database. So integration will look like this. You need to run these commands in your shell. So next step is create a process diagram, and both tools, Camunda and Workflow engine, allow visual process editing. Camunda 7 provide a package for all operating with this type of diagrams called Camunda Modeler. Essentially, it's just generate XML file recording BPMN standard and send it through REST API to Camunda endpoint. Workflow engines provide ready-made npm packages that you can use to embedding them into various frameworks such Angular and React, so you can build your own modeler. Also, to understand how each workflow engines work, you need to understand what abstraction this workflow provide. And at this point, we face a huge difference between two solutions, between Camunda 7 and Workflow Engine. Because BPMN has complex abstractions and Camunda need to implement these abstractions, the model of objects is huge and kinda complex. For example, for Camunda we have two types of abstraction, one from modeling time and another from runtime. When we model XML, we model process definition. It's kinda scheme in XML. Also, each square, each activity is a job definition. It's a piece of code that we can run when we go into this process definition. And when we go into runtime, we can face process instance. It's a specific running process. For example, when somebody want to buy a course from my example, that is his email, payment amount, and so on. It's specific running process. When process moving through the states, he found activity on his way. So activity is kind of some square, like send email, receive notification from acquiring, and so on. We also have process variables. It's kind of email, promo code, payment amount, and so on. We have job. It's kind of specific job that can be executed. For example, send notification through email. They connected to activity because one activity can have n jobs because of retries, incidents, and so on. All abstraction is quite simple and can fit in any software developer's head in just 2 days, maybe 1 day. Okay, we have workflow process scheme. It's like a process definition from Camunda. We have process instance. It's like a process instance in Camunda, but current state stored inside this table. And we have process instance persistence. It's like process variable. We also need to discuss process abstraction because previous abstraction, it's about solution, it's about database, and about persistence. Workflows is not only persistence, it's also how we use our symbols and how system translate it to piece of code. So, because Camunda is full-fledged, cover almost 100% BPMN described by OMG. That means that we have around 400 semantic constructions and about 20k abstractions like events, like activities, like participant, like error, escalation, timer, message, conditionals, multiple events, and so on and so on. It's really huge and you can spend a lot of time to understand how each symbol work and how they compare, how they work with each other. And because of Workflow Engine didn't support BPMN, they have a less complex abstractions. For me, it's just when I want to invent something like this type of abstraction will be come to my head first. It's just activity, something that we need to do, and transition. Transition, it's how we move from one activity to another. Also, activity in some of cases can work like a state. Okay, we have a diagram, but how we can connect this diagram to our code? It's quite simple in both solutions because they provide an easy way to do this. For example, in Camunda 7, you can, inside the Camunda modeler, you can write specific specific expression that point to your code inside your Java application or Kotlin application. For example, you can see I have a specific square, specific activity send email, and this activity point to send email delegate, and inside my code I just implement Java delegate class, as I have power object execution that provide everything that I need to work with inside my code. So here I can get email address and email ID, and after this I use my own component that send emails through SMTP. Same way workflow engine IO, I can put name of piece of code inside my application, and I have the same got object like process instance. When a process is executed, it retrieves the data. In my example of paying for courses, my context consists of email, selected course, promo code, course cost, and so on. This data need to be written down somewhere and given access to my piece of code. In both solutions, you can get them through an object passed to my class. In Camunda case, it's kinda delegate execution, and in case of workflow engine, this is process instance. For example, you can see how I get my set my variables and get my variables through this object execution, blah 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 blah. And also something like this work in workflow engine. You just go in from process instance, get parameter, also cast to someone type. Interesting idea that relevant functionality is workflow engine, in that you can pass your own context provider, which will control how and where such variables are persisted. In Camunda, instead, such variables are stored in name value white table for all instance, and often becomes a performance problem for when your context growing fast. You need to deploy XML file somehow to your solution, so and Camunda 7 and Workflow Engine offer two ways to deploy SHAM. First, it's through API or using Designer, which is essentially the same because Designer send diagrams through REST API. Also, you can make automation deployment of XML from project from resources. Camunda and Workflow Engine IO can find XML files inside your application and perform procedures for comparing and approving version and so on when your application is running, that engines can deploy XMLs for you. All magic of embedded engines, either with Camunda or with Workflow Engine, I get a traditional application for given languages and I can do whatever I want. I can wrap it at FAT.jar or X file and put it inside Docker, deploy it to Kubernetes, and so on. And there is no any problem in both solutions enable to view the current state of instances, their variables, edit them. In case of Camunda, the historical data, process that have completed, is available only in paid version. The current state of instances for Workflow Engine indicate like this, and I'm in yellow, yeah, and current states of process instance inside Camunda 7 indicates like this. You can see some squares, some circles. You need to know, you should keep in mind that let's talk about workload. You should keep in mind that if you need RPS more than 1000 from engine, is like you probably talking not about business processes, or you maybe talk about some ETL or log processing or something like that, and you need different tool like Apache Spark or Apache Flink. In terms of business processes, and in terms of workflow engines, and in terms in my cases, we can talk about process instances per second, and both solutions like Workflow Engine and Camunda 7 can handle around 200 process instances per second in the similar hardware. Another important consideration about workflow engines is the level of abstractions, including the information review and objects that should be modeled and implemented before using the tool's productivity. I'm involved because I have programming in Kotlin for a long time and I'm Camunda champion. And the last time when I wrote in .NET it was 8 years ago. But besides, based on my experience, a middle developer can learn the main principles of workflow engines from scratch around 3 or 5 weeks. And training from scratch in Camunda and BPMN may take 2 or 3 months. Camunda and BPMN are quite complex. I hope this video helps you to make right decision about your next workflow engine. My guidelines quite straightforward. If you're working on JVM, just use Camunda. If you're working on .NET stack, just use Workflow Engine. Bye, see you.